Welcome back to the Mad Genius Thesis, where we explore that age-old question, does genius come at a price? Is there a link between brilliance and instability? Today we're going to be diving into Carl Jung's Transcendent Function,
Yes.
using his essay and some of his other writings to try to understand this psychological mechanism that he believed was key to becoming a whole person.
Yes.
But here's the catch.
Okay.
Jung actually developed this concept during a period of intense inner turmoil after his split with Freud.
Right.
He even said he felt bombarded by unconscious images.
It's fascinating, isn't it? This period is often seen as Jung's own confrontation with the mad genius question.
Yeah.
Was he having a breakdown?
Yeah.
Or was it a breakthrough leading to a major psychological theory?
Right. So he wasn't just theorizing.
Exactly.
He was living this struggle.
Yeah.
Okay, so what exactly is the transcendent function? I have to admit, even after reading the essay, it's still a bit fuzzy for me.
Yeah, it's definitely complex, but think of it this way.
Okay.
Jung believed our psyche is always striving for wholeness. Okay.
Not perfection, but a kind of integration. The transcendent function is the process that helps us get there.
Integration of what, though?
Of all the different parts of ourselves, especially the conscious and unconscious.
Right.
Jung saw them less as separate entities and more like two ends of a seesaw.
Okay.
One goes up, the other goes down.
So there's always this tension.
Exactly. And the transcendent function acts as a bridge,
Okay.
not trying to eliminate one side, but to get them talking to each other.
Right.
Jung's big idea is that this dialogue, this integration, is where true psychological growth happens.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But isn't it a bit simplistic to say we're just made up of opposites? What about all the nuances in between?
Yeah, you're right to point that out. Even Jung admitted that his idea of opposites wasn't always so clear-cut. Sometimes those opposites exist entirely within our conscious minds.
So it's more like different parts of ourselves that need to be reconciled.
Exactly.
And that's where the transcendent function comes in. Exactly. It helps us bridge and integrate those seemingly conflicting parts of ourselves.
So how do we actually deal that? How do we engage this transcendent function in our lives? It all seems very theoretical.
Well, this is where Jung's emphasis on fantasy comes in. He saw fantasy not as an escape from reality, but as the key to unlocking the unconscious. A way to give those opposing forces a space to interact.
So it's about tapping into our imagination.
In a way, yes. Jung called fantasy the mother of all possibilities.
Right?
It's through engaging with those possibilities, even the strange or unsettling ones,
Yeah.
that we can access this transformative process.
And this is where we get into archetypes, right?
Mhm.
Those universal patterns of thought and behavior that Jung believed were part of the collective unconscious.
You got it. Jung saw archetypes as these powerful instinctual figures that we encounter in our unconscious, and encountering them,
Okay.
even if it's uncomfortable, actually triggers the transcendent function.
Okay, that's fascinating. So these archetypes aren't just interesting concepts to read about. They're like active agents in this process of becoming whole.
Precisely, he even described archetypes as mediators of the transcendent function itself. Think about it. An archetype like the hero
Yeah.
or the shadow
Yeah.
forces us to confront aspects of ourselves we might otherwise ignore.
So engaging with those archetypal stories, whether through myths or dreams or even our own personal narratives, can actually spark this process of integration.
That's Jung's idea, yes. And this is where symbolism becomes crucial. He believed that symbols act as bridges between the conscious and unconscious, allowing us to access those deeper archetypal energies.
So it's not just about understanding these symbols intellectually,
Right.
but about having a real lived experience of them.
You're getting it. For Jung, the transcendent function was more than just a mental exercise.
Right.
It's about transformation, about connecting with something beyond our everyday understanding. He even gives a fascinating example of the male grayling butterfly that prefers artificially stained females to natural ones.
Wow.
He suggests that there's an innate drive in us to reach beyond the known.
That's fascinating. Seems like we're talking about a very deep, almost spiritual process here, not just a psychological one.
It's definitely profound, and it's not limited to therapy sessions either.
Yeah.
Jung believed this happens everywhere,
Right.
all the time,
Yeah.
even in everyday experiences.
Right.
Think about moments of awe, of feeling connected to something larger than yourself.
Like those moments of wonder you get when you're out in nature.
Exactly. Jung believed those experiences, if we really pay attention to them, can help us connect with those deeper forces within us.
This is giving me a lot to think about. It makes me wonder about other psychological thinkers who've explored similar ideas. I'm thinking specifically about D.W. Winnicott.
Ah, yes.
and his work on transitional objects.
Winnicott, with his focus on child development, had those fascinating ideas about transitional objects and transitional phenomena.
Right. Things like a child's favorite blanket or teddy bear.
Right.
Winnicott believed these objects help children navigate the world as they separate from their mothers.
Right.
And what's interesting is the parallel between these objects and Jung's transcendent function.
Yeah.
Both act as a bridge between different realities.
Right.
The child's inner world and the outer world.
Right.
The conscious and the unconscious.
Right.
But wouldn't you say Jung's concept goes deeper? It's not just about comfort.
Absolutely.
But about transformation, about becoming a more complete person.
The transcendent function takes us into a realm of symbolism and archetypes, into the depths of the unconscious. But it's still fascinating to see how different thinkers coming from such different backgrounds arrive at these similar ideas about the importance of bridging inner and outer worlds.
It makes you wonder if there's some fundamental principle at play here, something essential to the human experience.
I think there might be. And you know what else is interesting? There are even parallels between Jung's transcendent function and Freud's theory of the ego.
By Freud.
Yeah!
The man Jung famously broke away from. I'm surprised to hear that.
It might seem unexpected, but think about Freud's structural model of the psyche. The id, ego, and superego.
Okay.
The ego's role is to mediate between the id's impulses and the superego's moral constraints.
Right. The ego is constantly trying to find that balance.
Exactly. And that mediating function of the ego actually shares some similarities with Jung's transcendent function. Both act as intermediaries trying to bring together seemingly opposing forces.
But Jung wouldn't see it as just finding a balance right. He'd say it's about creating something new.
You nailed it.
Something that transcends the limitations of those individual parts.
For Jung, the transcendent function, through its connection to symbolism and the unconscious, leads to genuine transformation.
Right.
It's not just about managing, it's about evolving.
That's a crucial distinction. So even in Freud's theory, we see hints of this idea that the psyche is striving for something beyond mere equilibrium.
Yes, and that striving, that drive for growth and wholeness is what Jung captured so beautifully with the transcendent function. And that's precisely why the transcendent function is so important, you know, when we're discussing this link between creativity and mental illness. After all, if this process is about bringing unconscious content into conscious awareness, isn't that walking a tightrope between brilliance and instability?
You've hit the nail on the head. It's like those who are most open to these unconscious forces may also be the most susceptible to psychological turmoil. That's the paradox, isn't it?
It certainly is. But remember, the transcendent function isn't just about unleashing, you know, those raw creative forces.
Right.
Jung believed it was also about integrating them,
Yeah.
bringing them into harmony with the conscious mind.
So it's not just about the eruption of the unconscious, but about finding a way to make it work with our everyday lives.
Exactly. Jung saw this as a dynamic process of growth, not a one-time event. He believed it happened everywhere, not just in therapy sessions.
So how can we, the listeners, actively engage with the transcendent function in our own lives outside of therapy? What does that even look like?
Well, Jung felt that relationships were one of the most fertile grounds for this kind of inner work.
Okay.
Think about it, relationships,
Yeah.
especially close ones, often bring up our deepest fears, our hidden desires, all those shadowy parts of ourselves that we might try to keep hidden.
It's true. Relationships can feel like a crucible sometimes, bringing all that unconscious material to the surface.
Precisely. And if we can view these relationship challenges through the lens of the transcendent function,
Right.
we might see them not as obstacles,
Yeah.
but as opportunities for growth.
So instead of getting stuck in blame and defensiveness, we try to understand what's happening beneath the surface.
That's the idea. We could ask ourselves, what's the underlying tension here? What are the opposing forces at play? Can this interaction be a chance for both people to learn and evolve?
It's almost like we're alchemists working together to transform the base metal of conflict into something valuable.
I love that analogy because that's a core concept in the transcendent function. Transforming conflict into something creative, something that brings us closer to wholeness.
But it's not just personal growth, right? Jung believed the transcendent function could also operate on a social and cultural level.
He did. Jung felt these same principles could be applied to the challenges we face as a society.
Yeah.
Think about the polarized debates we're constantly bombarded with today.
It often feels like we're stuck in these binary positions where each side is entrenched in their viewpoint, unwilling to understand the other.
And that's where the transcendent function offers a potential path forward instead of getting stuck in those binary positions.
Okay.
We can try to access a deeper field where creative solutions might emerge.
So it's about moving beyond the either-or
Yeah,
and embracing the both-and.
exactly. It's about recognizing the complexity of these issues and looking for solutions that transcend the limitations of our current political discourse.
This is giving me a lot to think about, but I have to ask, is it realistic to apply these ideas on such a large scale? Can we really expect people to engage with the transcendent function when they're in the heat of a political debate?
It's a valid question, and I'll admit it's not an easy task, but Jung would argue that it's necessary if we don't find a way to bridge those divides.
Right.
To integrate those opposing forces, we risk further fragmentation and conflict.
It's like the conflicts we experience within ourselves are playing out on the world stage.
Precisely. And just as the transcendent function helps us heal those inner divisions, it could offer a path towards healing the rifts in our society. Now let's shift gears a bit. We've been talking about psychology and society, but Jung was also fascinated by alchemy, wasn't he?
He was. He saw it not just as a primitive attempt to turn lead into gold, but as a metaphor for psychological transformation.
Exactly. At the heart of alchemy is this idea of taking something base and impure, and through a series of transformations, turning it into something precious and refined.
That sounds very similar to the transcendent function, taking those raw, unconscious contents and transforming them into something that enriches the personality.
You're catching on. Jung saw the alchemists as engaging in a symbolic process that mirrored individuation.
So those alchemical symbols and rituals weren't just about external transformations. They represented the inner work of the psyche.
Exactly. Jung believed that studying alchemy could give us a deeper understanding of the transcendent function and its role in psychological growth. It's a way of seeing the world through the lens of transformation.
This idea of alchemical thinking is intriguing. It's a powerful way to approach not just personal challenges, but societal ones as well. If we can learn to see those conflicts as opportunities for alchemical transformation, maybe we can imagine a world where discord is transmuted into something truly valuable.
Jung saw the transcendent function not as a one-time event, but as an ongoing cyclical process.
So it's not about reaching some final state of perfect wholeness, but about embracing the continual dialogue between the conscious and unconscious.
Precisely.
It's
like
like
a dance, a back and forth flow between these two fundamental aspects of the psyche.
And that rhythm, that ebb and flow, is what leads to growth and transformation.
That's the idea. Jung even compared it to the beating of a heart.
Hmm.
A vital process that keeps the psyche alive and evolving.
So it's not about eliminating those conflicts and tensions entirely, but learning to move with them, to see them as part of a larger dynamic process.
Beautifully put. And that's crucial, especially when we talk about the mad genius archetype. If we try to suppress or deny those darker, more chaotic aspects of ourselves, they're likely to erupt in unhealthy ways.
Yeah.
But if we can learn to integrate them, to dance with them, they can actually become a source of incredible creativity and insight.
So it's not about erasing the darkness,
Right.
but about finding a way to let it shine.
Exactly. It's about embracing the full spectrum of human experience, the light and the shadow, the order and the chaos. And that's what Jung's concept of the transcendent function offers, a way to navigate that complex terrain, to find meaning and purpose in those seemingly contradictory forces that shape our lives.
It's amazing how this transcendent function ties together so many different ideas. You talk about opposites and archetypes and symbolism, even alchemy and the rhythm of life itself.
And don't forget the ego and the self and Winnicott's transitional objects.
Yeah,
Jung's ideas are intricate,
it is.
but they're all connected in this fascinating web.
It's what makes them so compelling. We're not just static beings. We're these dynamic, evolving systems, and that dynamism is what makes us both complex and capable of such incredible things.
Absolutely, and that's where the transcendent function is so crucial for understanding creativity, especially when we're talking about, the connection to mental illness. If creativity comes from this back and forth between the conscious and unconscious, then those most open to the unconscious might also be the most vulnerable.
It's that image of the tightrope walker. Again, pushing boundaries, taking risks, but always with the potential for a fall.
Precisely, that willingness to confront the unknown, to delve into those depths, is often what fuels groundbreaking creativity, but the cost can be high.
So it's not enough to just unleash those raw creative forces. We need to find a way to integrate them, to make them work for us, not against us.
That's the key. Jung believed that the transcendent function wasn't just about tapping into the unconscious, but about forging a conscious relationship with it. And that's a lifelong process, not a destination.
Right. It makes me think about how we often try to compartmentalize ourselves. We want the creativity, the inspiration, but without the messy, difficult parts.
It's a natural impulse, but Jung would say it's ultimately unsustainable to truly harness the power of the transcendent function we have, to embrace the full spectrum of who we are, the light and the shadow.
It's about finding a way to let those seemingly opposite forces work together.
Exactly, and that's where the real magic happens, when we stop trying to suppress or control those parts of ourselves and instead allow them to become part of a larger, more integrated whole.
It sounds like we're talking about a kind of alchemy of the self, transforming those base metals of conflict and chaos into something truly precious.
That's a beautiful way to put it, because that's what Jung's concept of the transcendent function ultimately offers us: a path towards wholeness, towards becoming more fully ourselves, both creatively and psychologically.
This has been a truly fascinating exploration of the transcendent function, but as with all things Jungian, I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
It's a concept that rewards repeated revisiting. I encourage you to, delve deeper into Jung's writings, explore the works of other Jungian scholars, and most importantly, pay attention to those moments in your own life where you sense the transcendent function at work.
Those moments of inspiration, the relationships that challenge you to grow those glimpses of something deeper and more meaningful. Jung believed these moments are happening all around us all the time.
And perhaps by becoming more conscious of this process, we can learn to tap into our own creative potential in a way that is both transformative and life-affirming.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the heart of Jungian psychology. Remember, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep creating. We'll be back next time with another episode of the Mad Genius Thesis.